manipulative motivation and manipulation. Today, lesson 3, see big and small. So it's seeing, and this is for those that are part of the backstage passes, you get a bonus. The first time we went through this, it's it was amazing, but it's like magic. So this second time through, it's going to have stuff that it'll just blow your mind. There's been, in the last few weeks, so much frustration building in me where people just don't see. Tom, is it just me? Or do you get frustrated when people just don't see?
Oh, I think we all do to some extent.
Do you think people get as frustrated as I do?
Probably not.
Peter, do you have anybody in your life at all that you get frustrated? Really, I'm not talking oh, I'm frustrated. I'm talking you just want to tear somebody's hair out. Does that ever happen to you, or is it just me, Peter?
No, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens from my perspective as well as everybody else. I think we all lose sight of what we're trying to accomplish from time to time, and then we don't see, and it's frustrating. Frustration personally, and I think collectively.
Where I get most of my frustration from in people not seeing, I think, is that people say they want something, but I don't know if they don't see what to do to get there. I don't know if they don't see. I remember when my 18-year-old son, when he was 12, he was talking to me, and he said, I don't know, we were talking about something. He says, well, Dad, yeah, I'm not going to do that with you. I'm like, okay, why? He's like, none of your goals ever work. When you set goals, none of them occur. I'm like, excuse me? What does that mean? He's like, Dad, remember when I was 9? I'm like, okay. He said, and we had a goal to go to Thailand to help stop child trafficking. I'm like, okay, I remember that. He says, we didn't go. I'm like, did you do anything to go ahead and make that trip happen? Well, no. I'm like, you're 12 years old, for crying out loud. Do you not see if you don't do work, then things don't happen? And it was like this epiphany that I'm like, what is wrong with my parenting? I am a pathetic parent where I have a son who thinks that he can just go ahead and set a goal and he doesn't need to do any work to get there. I'm like, I'm just terrible. Tom, have you ever had that happen in any situations?
Well, I think every parent has had that situation where, and not only as a parent, but I think as a manager, you have those kind of frustrations too, where it's like, what do you mean you don't get it? This is what we were supposed to do. This is what you got paid to do. Or in the case of a child, this is what we planned on doing. You need to do your piece of this. So, yeah, I think we all can relate to that.
So when we look at ask questions and then listen, and then, lesson was questions. Lesson 2 is listen. Lesson 3 is see. And so I can always tell, and later on I'll show you guys one of the journal entries that's going to get, I think, built into one of these future, because there's so much frustration in me. It's like, why don't people see things? Why don't they see? What is going on? And so, do either of you know why people don't see things?
Well, I think there's a couple of parts to it. One is they think they already know. So if you already know, when your kids or anybody says, I know, they think they already know. And that, and the second is, whether people don't feel any responsibility for the result, so they don't see that they have to contribute. So for me, it's kind of a combination of those two things.
Interesting.
So, when you hear "I know" or you get no input, then to me that's when you realize they don't see where their contribution is and what their contribution is.
So, Peter, when somebody says, I know, I get it, but they don't know, they don't get it, then how do you respond to that?
You know that, Mark. I was just reading about it in your white paper. It's people who talk a lot, and you've got 10 reasons, right? And I think one of them was to seduce. So what I tend to do is try to then seduce somebody. I guess is probably one word to describe getting them to see when I know they don't, because I realize they're not going to take any action.
And that's why you became, a board member of BMW, and I didn't, because I know it comes as a huge shock to you and Tom both and any one of the participants in Leverage. I am not that good of a seducer.
Well, number 9, I think, on your list is destruction.
That I'm better at. Like after one of the mastermind seminars, we had, a bunch of us went out to, lunch, and I went around the table and said, I was presenting at the time. I don't do that much anymore. Everybody else does that, I love that. But anyways, I was going around the table and I asked everybody. And I got to my wife and I said, what would be one suggestion that you would give me on the presentation today and everything? And she looked, and then she was very introspective, and she said, very insightful, and she said, I think you tear things down that you're trying to build up. So she saw something. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I guess it depends on, your method of creating movement, right? But I'm just staring at the 10 reasons why people talk. But if the intention is to help people see, or you're responding to "I know" as being the example, then to me I'm seducing thinking and trying to reconcile intention to get people to do. And you could say use connect in there as well. It's once you hear "I know," you've got to quickly figure out whether they really know or whether they just want you to stop or they don't want to participate in. And that could be a sales team, it could be any or project or anything. But "I know" is not part of the solution.
See, in this,
when I hear "I know," I just say, "Really? Tell me."
See, this is why Tom and I get along just fine. So Michael,
if they can't explain it, and invariably they'll look at you like they're deer in the headlights. And it's like, okay, now let's get back to reality and start to do the work we need to be doing.
Yeah, because when somebody says "I know," they either follow it up with "I know" and "I will do X, Y, and Z." Right? When people just say "I know" and nothing follows it, they just shut off the ability to see and do.
Yeah, they're just blowing you off.
Yeah.
See, it's interesting because Mike Radford, he went ahead and said, "Mark, I think people have a hard time understanding your intention." Frank Forte, who's in the Navy, I believe, really smart guy, programmed nuclear missiles. And I was just talking to him last week, and he said, he does executive coaching too, and he said, Mark, I think a C-level executive of Fortune 100 company could only last in the room with you for 4 hours. He was very specific. And so I thought that was interesting. Like he sees stuff, that very few people see. So when we look at ask questions, then listen, then see reveals our intentions. Like Peter, you can tell he's very intentional when he's listening, okay? So he's very intentional when he's listening, and he's seeing, do they not want to participate? Like with me, like, how could they not want to participate? Like, why are they even here? Like, if they're an employee, why am I even paying them? Like, if they're, like, why are you even here? Like, why are you? And so I don't, like, Peter, I think, like, he goes and says, okay, which of these 10 things? So if we don't ask the right question and if we do not listen and see, we will not gain leverage we need to create mutual beneficial solutions. And so the seeing is what connects into, the intentions. And so if you're going through this course alone, you don't have an art mentor, you don't have 2 art buddies, well, I'm just telling you, you're not going to go ahead and gain anything close to what you could, should, need to as a result of the course, because your art mentor is potentially going to know more about leverage than you do, more about the course than you do. They might not have as much life experience, but they can help you because they know leverage. Your 2 art buddies aren't going to be probably as knowledgeable as you are. What's strange, though, is I just had epiphany in the last week or so. You'll learn more from your 2 art buddies than your art mentor, just like we learn more from our kids than we do our parents. And so when we look at this is, if you're not part of the Wizards community, I'm saying you need to be part, because this wizard guy, the guy's a genius. And when you look at his, the wizard's art, it's just amazing. Like you see all these different colors, all these different people, and so it will attract people to you. And so if you want leverage, how do you attract people? How do you attract? And so you can see here where you have the art mentor, that would be Elise, and then you have the, and the two to Emily and Ginger Ann. And so who is your mentor? Who are your 2 art buddies? If you don't have an art mentor for the course and you don't have 2 buddies, you're getting a fraction of what you should be, could be, from the course. And then you need to have clarity. Like, what do you want from the course? It's amazing to me how many people don't really know what they want from the course. And so if you don't know what you want from the course, you're not going to get as much from the course as what you could. So from today's lesson on C, how does that connect back into what you want to accomplish in being able to go through it? And that's really a process we call, engineered clarity. So now we're going to drill into more details, on today on C. So when we look at C, we have to see, like you see around the blue, there's the red, which connects back into the personality masteries. And so, how can Peter and Tom, last more than 4 hours with me, somebody who's socially autistic? It's they somehow see the energy that I have and say, okay, he's got strengths, he's got weaknesses, this is how we can go through and do it. And so when we look at this, it's connected back in. The DNA for people connects throughout the entire leverage model. The DNA for business connects throughout the entire, model. If you want to take leverage and you want to monetize it, either personally, yourself individually, or as a group you're with, or a business you're with, a community-based organization, if you want to turn this course into money for you, for your organization, you have to understand the DNA for business, the 530 grid. And then the DNA for life is blended in throughout all of leverage too. And this is what gives it the magical and the positive part of being able to go through it. So do we see big and small? So did you read, the white paper, Seeing Big, seeing and being, the seeing and being white paper, which is seeing big and small. Most people tend to see big or they see small. They're not able to do both simultaneously. And again, going through the Personality Mastery Certification course will help you in doing that. And then do we know how to see to build intention? So when we look at intention and we can see through somebody else's eyes, then we know how they're seeing us. And often we have a hard time about seeing ourselves, much less seeing others. Tom will probably kind of laugh, and then he'll probably go ahead and, say, yeah, I don't know about that. But Tom is one of the most self-aware people I've ever met on the planet. Tom, ideas, thoughts on why you're that way, how you became that way?
I got old. And I think with age, especially when you get to mine, you're playing the back nine, so it's like, you only have so many shots left. So you either get it or you don't. And I, hate to say it, but I just, I just don't do stupid anymore. I used to try and work with them and try to help them, but can't do it anymore. Frustrates me too much. And so, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, it does. We met when I was around, 40. Mid-40s, so Tom was going to be late 50s, early 60s. And I remember thinking the reason people are so responsive to Tom is because he's 15 years older than I am. Like, he's just more experienced than I am. So when I get to be 60, they'll respond to me like Tom does. And then I thought again, and I said, no, I don't think so, Mark. I think he's been this way for a long time. So when Tom says about getting older, no, when he was, 9 years old, Tom, or 7 years old? What were you when you were cleaning the blacktop, of your dad's service station?
Yeah, about that age. Yep.
So, like, you were a different, 7 or 9 year old boy.
Well, I was an only child for 7 years before my next brother came along, and so I grew up with adults. And I grew up with, a mother who was very caring and was always, telling me that I should help as many people as I possibly can. Always go, help the underdog. And my dad was an entrepreneur, and he had a group of business people that he met with every morning for an hour and a half or so. And I grew up in that environment. And so, it was, although I had a great childhood too. I mean, I did all the things kids are supposed to do and got in as much trouble as you're supposed to. But I think it was that other 7 years that I had with adults that gave me a different perspective to look at. And I failed early in life too. And I think that gave me a different perspective in life.
So you see things, Tom, that, like, nobody else sees. And
well, I don't know. I think I think there's a difference. I think people may see it. They just don't want to believe it or admit it.
Why?
That one, Peter, help us out here, bud, because I'm not sure I understand that one, but I don't know. Maybe they're just afraid. Maybe they don't believe. Could be a myriad of things. I don't know. Peter, what do you think?
I can't speak for everybody else, only other than like you, Tom. I mean, I came up through life certainly I didn't believe I was the smartest guy in the room. In fact, I often thought I was the least intelligent guy in the room when I was younger. So my hunger was just to understand. And and I don't think that's any different today for me. If you're whatever it is you're doing, I mean, I always kind of known where I wanted to go in the big picture, and that is, to create security for my family. Let's just say that's the big goal. But I've never walked into a room thinking I know. I mean, I always walk into a room or any situation since I was a kid, just not knowing till somebody helped me understand. And that didn't mean I was restricted by whatever anybody told me. My aim was always to, like my dad said, if you're going to do something, do it right. So that always drove me beyond just understanding what the best people in the room or in that situation knew, to how do we do better. So for me, at least, it's the belief that there's always more to know from everybody. So it's the same when somebody says, I know, and it isn't followed up with or it's not, I understand, and this is what I'm going to do, then that kind of sets a trigger off in my head for they don't know. And I've been in that place of not knowing many, many times and learned from the failure of that too. So the exploration in continuously wanting to know and understand and reconcile with where you're going individually or as a team is just part of my circle.
I think
it's interesting. I think, and I don't know how old I was when I finally figured this out, but the thing that kind of helped me through those kinds of things when people said I know and damn well they don't know is it typically is I think that they're doing things that they may not be fitted for or that they like to do. And so a long time ago, anytime I meet somebody or we get engaged with somebody, I always try to find out what would be their highest and best use of their talents. What is that? And I think once you drill down and you start to see what their highest and best use is from their perspective, and I guess yours, then you tend to work with people and help them get to the place that they want to be, which makes them the happiest, and that's when they're doing things that they like to do.
So do you know, Tom?
Make any sense?
Do you know, Tom, in 12 years you've never said that? Not once.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I keep thinking, does he purposely do this to me? Like, is he just holding back on certain things? like the, the rings of influence? Like, that was about 6-7 years into, our relationship, and now 12 years in, I'm like, that's how he does what he does. Oh, my gracious, that's genius. I can't believe that. That makes all the sense in the world. I can see that about Tom. Peter, I think I already know the answer to the question I'm going to ask, but I'm still going to ask it. Do you know how utterly strange and unique and different you are from, like, human beings?
Not really.
Right?
How's that for a compliment, Peter?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I am human, though.
Well, see, there are times that I do see that, and I'm like, okay, I still like him. But then other times I'm just like how does he go ahead and see the success he's seen in his career? And how does he remain humble? How does he know everything he knows? And how does he remain curious? Like, that is a gift that there's very few people on the planet. Like, there's just not very many people that seem to have that, Peter. Any ideas where you got that from?
I don't know. my parents, I guess, in the community I grew up in, I would say. I mean, similar to Tom, you know, you were taught to contribute, to work hard. If you acted like a smart ass, somebody pretty soon set you straight when you were a kid. So this, I think, at the base level, it was just knowing that you didn't know it all, or being taught you don't know it all. So don't think you do, and contribute and listen. Maybe I was from the generation that was made to listen sometimes when you were saying I know.
You know, Mark, it'd be interesting to find out. I don't know how we'd do it, but I think one of the keys to whatever I've been able to accomplish is not what I've accomplished; it's what I failed at.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe people who don't do a lot just haven't failed enough.
Well, I think in today's educational world, political world, even business world, like the whole world is saying you didn't fail. Like, you didn't finish the race, that's not failure. You know, you didn't even show up at the race. That's not failure. We'll still give you a trophy. Like, you got an F, but that's not failure. Or like that, like there's, like now it doesn't matter. It seems like no matter what you do, it's not failure.
You know, on that, that's very interesting, because on that, and I'm still living it right now in a sense in some of the business things I've got going on, when things don't turn out the way you expected, assuming you have those kind of expectations, when they don't go as well, not necessarily failure. I mean, I certainly look back, even though we may have made decisions, or I may have made decisions to move on in a slightly different direction, and look at what could I have done differently to have got a better result. And it reminds me of one of my sons when they had a car accident, and you know, it wasn't my fault, and all the reasons why it wasn't their fault, and couldn't take that responsibility until I said, well, what could you have done differently if in order to avoid this in the future? I mean, right down to not getting in the car. And it's that. So I think that's a large part of it. It's not just failure on a scale that you see as certain, definitely defined as failure. But when things don't quite go according to plan, whether you move on without reflecting and, well, what could I have done differently to modify? So I think that's a very important component of any time you're not achieving, I don't know, the sales goal, the revenue goal, the capital raising, whatever it is. You're nearly there, but you didn't quite get there. What would you do differently, rather than just accepting that it didn't work out as well as it could have?
So,
and that certainly was important.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go in to the Q&A part here. So there's going to be a short pause. Like, I hope everybody, like this one, I knocked it out of the park. Like, this one was amazing. Like, there's so much energy. So hopefully you saw the things I saw. In the Q&A, you want to go ahead and, you're going to see more. There's going to be, like, when you look at, and then look at getting involved in one-on-one coaching and mentoring, look at seminars and workshops, look at mastermind groups, look at all of those things, because all of those things, like, leverage is not a destination. It's a journey. So we're going to take a short pause here, jump into the Q&A, definitely for sure. Dive into that and go through that with your art mentor and your art buddy, and say, your two art buddies, and say, what action are we going to take from it? Here we go.